Okay, Ed Waters, State Street Associates. How are you?
Hi, good morning, Lori. It's still morning. No, it isn't. It's afternoon. Good
No, it's
afternoon. I
not.
lost track of the day. Sorry.
It happens. So I did make you a co-host, so you should be able to share your screen if you have a PowerPoint. If not, have at it.
Yep. No, I don't. I just had a quick points to say on this. So bill got through the legislature. It was signed into law. It does go into effect immediately, though some provisions will go into effect several years after the law goes into now that the law is into effect. Some key points of what we tried to do with this bill. We wanted to make sure the industry was protected in this law. We also want to make sure there was good collaboration between the industry and the NGOs who were also part of the process on this. Um, some of the good points, the NJDEP and the NJ Department of Ag will work together on this bill. So that's something that's going to be interesting as we move forward. Um, some of the key points, there are waivers. There's a conditional use waiver in the bill for by given out by the Department of Environmental Protection for limited specified use of prohibited invasive species. All this has been the invasive species, non-invasive species, and prohibited invasive species have all been defined in the bill. Um, We've also made sure that cultivator is defined in the bill so that if you're a cultivator, you are we know who you are, and it's spelled out for the departments to make sure that they're not overstepping what they do as it pertains to being a cultivator. Um, this bill commencing on the 13th month, the departments are required to uh, propagate um, invasive species, imported, introduced, prohibited invasive species. Oh, I'm sorry. 13th month, the effective date. No person shall propagate prohibited invasive species in the state, import or otherwise introduce prohibited invasive species into the state without a written conditional use waiver pursuant to this act. So that part of it does not go into effect until the 13th month. So you do have the next 12 months to get through stock or what have you. This is an interesting one for the actual getting the rules promulgated. They have the 49th month, so they have up to 5 years to promulgate rules, which promulgating rules is a tricky situation as there's a lot of moving parts, whether it's the department, the governor's office. So that's something that we can work on, and I'll work through Lori on that. We have allow cultivators to
Yeah.
can
Hey, Ed,
yeah.
cultivars, right? Not
I'm
cult.
sorry, cultivars. I apologize.
That's okay. I
People are
was
probably like,
like,
what the
who's
hell is
a
this guy talking
cultivator?
about now? Uh,
All good, all good.
uh, um, yeah, or can will be exempt for 2 years, and then consultation with the department and with the Invasive Species Council can then go beyond 2 years worked out. Um, there's 13 members, right? I'm sorry. There's 19 members um, of the board, which will include ex officio cabinet officers, members of the public, the state forester, two folks from environmental organizations, two representatives from food agriculture sector, two representatives from the landscape industry, two representatives from the nursery industry, two representatives from higher ed, one representative from county park system, one involved in urban ecosystem, and one member of the general public with knowledge of expertise of invasive species. So that's the makeup of the council when they are appointed. Um, and they serve at 3-year terms. Um, And so that's the gist of the bill. It's the challenge is going to be, I think, getting, making sure that these rules are promulgated quickly, and making sure that we're keeping up with folks as to make sure that they're following everything they need to follow in order to be able to operate in this space. Does anyone have any questions?
So raise your hand if you have any questions for Ed as it relates to the actual act, what's included in the bill. Ed, I actually do have a question.
Sure.
We talked about this a little bit. So yeah, the Department of Environmental Protection is tasked with the job of creating the rules and regs around this
Yes.
bill or this act, and they have a certain amount of time to do it. And a lot of our growing propagating or planting or managing stems on a lot of what's in that bill. For example, those named exemptions, right? We
Yeah.
worked really hard to get them in. They expire in 2 years.
Mhm.
So what happens if and it certainly isn't the first time, if the DEP doesn't get those rules and regs done on time?
So one of the things that I think there's a couple things that we need to move forward on working through NJNLA and NJGIC to meet with the department, to meet with the governor's office, and the NJDEP, and the person who's responsible for this, and try to get some guidance from them, understanding if they don't promulgate these rules, then what is the process by which we can get this addressed. I don't know that we need the rules in place. If it says through the department and the board, I think we'd have to ask the person if the board can work directly with, or the council can work directly with the department to get that dealt with and get those that 2 year done. Or so because again, they have under the law to up to 5 years to get this done. And again, there's a lot of moving parts, both in the department, has to go to the governor's office. The governor's office has to approve. So we want to make sure that in the absence of rules, that there is an ability for the council to operate and for people to continue to do business in the state of New Jersey.
Okay, very important, very important. So we're on it. We'll take care of that. We'll
Yeah.
make sure we take care of that. Okay. And then I guess the other question is there's a 3 month moratorium, well, I guess, I don't know if that's the right word, on
Mhm.
any rules being created at the moment, right?
Yes.
Does
Yeah.
that affect this? Because this um is effective the day it was signed, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
It will impact it in the fact that other rules that are still out there that are part of that moratorium. At least 3 months. We'll see if in 3 months they extend it, or if they let that moratorium die. But then there will be a backup of those rules, which will then it all moves forward and crosses log jams in other places. So that will be a challenge that the governor has put a moratorium on new rules. And yes, this law will be impacted by that because again, there are no new rules going to be promulgated.
okay. So we're in it for the long haul. We'll make sure
Yeah.
everything continues to be protected as far as the industry is concerned. It's been a long process. For those of you, I noticed when I was looking at who registered, there's a lot of people that were part of this coalition that we had. Oh my gosh, for a couple of years now, some of the other organizations reached out to us saying, "Hey, like this bill is going to affect your members. Do you want to help, don't want to work with us to make sure that everything is the industry is protected?" Of course, we said yes. It's been a great process. I think what we have now is certainly better than what it could have been, and we'll continue to work together and certainly have quite a bit of input and um, people on that Invasive Species Council. So we'll continue to protect the industry. So this is going to be the final call for questions for Ed. Raise your hand if you have anything.
And
Oh, you're getting
Lori, no,
easy. Go ahead. I'm
okay.
sorry.
I know the other point I was going to make is in getting the folks appointed to this council can sometimes be a challenge. So that's something we'll also be on top of is pushing the governor's office to get these appointments done. sooner rather than later.
Right. Very good. Very good. And just so you know, and everybody else that's on this meeting, we have already provided a list of our recommendations from a coalition standpoint to the Secretary of Agriculture. We were asked to do that. List went out as soon as possible. We had already been working on it for a while, so I have no idea how long it's going to take before they actually appoint. But I guess maybe we can put a little bit of pressure. Uh,
Mhm.
to get that going. So
Yeah.
fantastic. Okay. Well, Ed, thank you so much for.
I think this gentleman had
Okay.
Kevin.
Looks like Kevin. Go for it, Kevin.
Yes, the one question I have is the rules that are going to be written is only going to be written by the DEP with no input from anybody else.
They will be written by the DEP. The Department of Ag will have input, but the Department of Ag won't write separate rules from the DEP. It'll be a collaboration from both, but it'll come out of the DEP.
So is that going to be once the panel is selected that they start writing the rules, or I'm confused
Um,
as to writing the rules without the panel?
Mm. So the panel, actually, the council, as it's called, uh, doesn't really have a role in the rulemaking as far as I can read the bill, right? The bill says that the department, and that is the DEP, shall adopt pursuant to, blah, 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 and in consultation with the Department of Agriculture. That was something we insisted on. Rules and regulations to implement the provisions of the act. It doesn't say the council is responsible for that. Okay. Now the council has a ton of work to do. The council is not left out of the party for sure, because they're making, first of all, they have to, become a group, put on their own, figure out their own rules of order, all that kind of stuff. They have to review that 2009 report that was done, update it, look at the list of potential invasive species, look at the list of the ones that are in the bill, figure out a way to make sure those exemptions that are listed in the bill continue. There's got to be a process for that. So the council has work, but it's not the rulemaking. The rulemaking is done by the DEP.
It's
And
going
the
to
Department of Ag agreed on that. Like that's normal, I guess.
all right, but they have 4 years to write the rules.
Close to five, the 49th month.
29th. And will the council be selected prior to that? Like, what's the
Hope so.
council going to be deciding on if the rules are not completed?
And that's a big part of what we've talked about, and we'll go and meet with the DEP through NJNLA and NJGIC to get some direction from them. I know right now, I'll give you an example. We're working on a recycled content regulations for plastic containers. The rules are not out, but the department did put out a guidance document and did put out a frequently asked questions page so that people knew what they had to do to comply with the law in absence of regulations.
So,
All for me. Thank you, Ed.
You're welcome.
so the work of the council can still continue, and
Sure.
the what the act is looking to do can still do it, even without the rules and regs, which is
Yeah, yeah.
here
The
way to do
department's going to do what they're going to do in absence of the regs, and it might actually, in some ways, be helpful if the council starts to meet and finds that there's recommendations that they want to make to the department. They can get in before the rules get in, because once the rules hit the register, in our experience, the department is loath to change it because then they have to go through the whole process all over again, and that's not something that they're typically have been fans of doing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, wonderful. Okay, well, thank you again. And Ed has been wonderful through this process and is always available to us in case there's anything. So if you think of something that you didn't think of now, feel free to reach out for sure. Okay. Thank you again, Ed.
Welcome.
Okay, next up we have Bob Blue. I can't wait to hear this what you have to say. This is gonna give us some light at the end of the tunnel, right? So
Yeah,
uh,
Yeah.
Okay, can
Thanks,
you
Lori.
share your screen? I think you can, right? Hopefully.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot. I did not make a PowerPoint. I was just
Oh,
gonna more have a bit of a conversation about the
oh,
process that we've gone through.
even
Um,
better.
so we started seeing a little bit of the writing on the wall about 7 or 8 years ago. You got to realize that New Jersey was, I think, 45th or 46th state to actually have an invasive species council formed. Whereas a lot of the states that we ship to, especially in New England, but also Maryland and Virginia, they started banning the importation of a lot of these same plants that are now on our list well before COVID. And so we started seeing this pressure from our customers to say, like, hey, by the way, you can't ship me this, you can't ship me that. Um, and a lot of it was caught by accident. We even had some situations in Maryland where a customer ordered something, and then we got a letter from the Maryland Department of Agriculture saying, "Hey, you can't ship that here anymore." So we were getting caught on the backside of this, even though it wasn't on us for shipping it in there; it was on the retailer for bringing it in. We were running into this problem with a lot of this plant material, and fast forward a few years, we started making a conscious push to add in more native plants, more species form native plants, and that was from desire from our customer base, both retail and landscape. They were really looking for native alternatives for plants and wanted to broaden the offering, and so we did that in turn. And through that process, we started realizing that two things. One, we were starting to see the sales of some of these big groups. Miscanthus was one of the big ones. You wouldn't have to go back, but maybe 15 years, and we were selling tens of thousands of Miscanthus a year. And just because of the shrinking demand, that had been cut down to less than about 3,000 plants a year. And so we kind of said to ourselves, like, okay, do we really need to sell this product? Do we really need to keep it around? And we started traveling around in the midst of doing this big push for native plants, and you start seeing in the wild where there's always been that 2009 report that came out. There were plants on that we just shook our heads. We're like, that's not invasive. We've been growing that for 50 years and never seen a rogue one come up here at the farm ever once. And then you start looking at some of the different locales around. Um, Go to the Poconos in the summer or fall and see the full canopies of barberry growing there. There's an area in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, where there's an entire hillside that is covered in miscanthus. And so on one side, we're saying, hey, we're going to grow a lot more of these native plants. This is, better for the ecology. This is what our customers want. This is the direction that we want to go. But on the other side, we were still growing things like barberry and miscanthus and English ivy that we could see in our own backyard doing damage. And you know, it, one of the things that was very challenging for us is making the choices of, okay, if we're not going to offer this, then we need to offer something else. And when New York did their invasive species list, they came out with suggestions, and they were awful. And if there's somebody here from the New York Department of Ag or New York DEP, I'll stand up and tell them to their face. Their suggestions of plant this, not that, were awful. For instance, one of their suggestions for miscanthus was Muhlenbergia capillaris, so pink muley grass, which literally will only grow in about 10% of New York State. It's not hardy for the rest of the state. Um, and so we really put a lot of thought into, okay, what's a realistic substitute for these things, and then to take it one step further, what can we actually get our hands on? What can we actually provide for customers? Because some of these suggested subs, and some of them are great. North American Land Trust has a great website of plant this, not that, and they do make some very good suggestions. Some of them, I don't know where you'd find that plant for sale in wholesale quantities. You might be able to find one or two at a native plant farm somewhere, but to replace something like Ioannina salatus, that's a tough fight to fight, and it's going to be a challenge because the best native subs we have are just not available in the supply that the invasive species was available in. And so it has been about a 6 or 7 year process of learning both what we think good substitutes are, what works in our landscape in different and in landscapes in different parts of our sales region, and also learning like what can our supply chain support. And so it is a slow process to learn this, but I mean, thankfully that like the hard part's being done, and Bruce is going to talk in a little bit about good substitutions to have, but it has not been a negative for our business thus far. Have we had a couple of customers that say like, well, I really need miscanthus no matter what? Yeah, those customers are still there. But what we've found is by replacing it with other things that we don't have to worry about where we're shipping it to or what fines we may get imposed upon us by sending it to the wrong place. Um, we have not missed anything at anything. I'm saying zero of these varieties have we said, man, I really wish we had this plant back. Um, so we thought it was going to be a very painful process to get started with, but I just want to assure everybody on the backside, it is really not the end of the world, nor the end of the industry to say, we have to live without these few plants. It's just been a much friendlier process to go through. And the customers that still say they want to have the X, Y, or Z plants, we just have conversations with them. It's a great opportunity to open up, be like, hey, have you been in Montgomery County? Have you seen what happened on that whole hillside that's just completely covered in miscanthus? If you talk to them and try to get to the root of why we're making these changes and why these bills were written in the first place, that's a great conversation starter to really talk about what are their customers really looking for. Are they looking for a specific plant, or if they were looking for a solution? And if they're looking for a solution, we can find other plants to solve that problem. Moving forward, one of the biggest opportunities, and it's also a little bit of a hurdle right now before the council is formed, but we deal with a lot of breeding companies that have been breeding sterile varieties of things, and we do have a couple of plants that are on that temporary exemption list. There's the barberries from University of Connecticut, which are awesome plants, which have been certified sterile. There's a couple of miscanthus, one's from University of Georgia, another's from North Carolina State University. But there's a lot of breeding going on because these plant breeders saw 15, 20 years ago that writing on the wall way before we did to say, like, these plants are not good for our environment. If we want to continue to sell these very popular items, we've got to make them safer from an ecological standpoint. And so there's a lot of plants that we need to get in this first or second round of exemptions. Like we have a sterile Euonymus elatus compactus called Fireball Seedless. We have a sterile variegated miscanthus called Bandwidth. There are options out there that were not included in this original exemption list, and that's going to be my efforts after the council is formed about saying, look, these are all the breeding efforts that are going into making things sterile, making things safe for New Jersey. And so far, the states around us have been really good about it. Pennsylvania is probably the best. They have a really great exemption process where, you can submit an application for it, and it's basically just reviewed by a few people on the scientific side, and they can look at the data coming from the breeder to say what their sterility testing was, and they've approved some things pretty quickly. My hope is that New Jersey is going to be along a similar line where, we have a council of a mixture of people, business, science, academia, government, the public, to have conversations about why we need these plants and why they are safe alternatives to the plants on the invasive species list. And sorry, I just spoke more in the last 10 minutes than I have in the last 3 days. So I'll open it up for questions at this point.
Yeah, Bob, this is great. Thank you. And you make me think of something, right? Because Pennsylvania definitely sounds like they have it down, right? They're
They do.
doing a great job.
They do.
So why not like borrow what they've done, right? When it comes time to figure out how to approve exemptions or to renew exemptions in our case, right? Why recreate the wheel? We should
that's going to be our argument. That's going to be
Yeah.
our push. We can look at the states around us and say, granted, we have some environments in New Jersey that are a little unique. Pine Barrens come to mind, but for the most part, if something has ended up on an exemption list in New York, PA, Delaware, and Maryland, for us to be the lone standout on that, it's probably going to be a bit of a tough branch to go out on. I think we'll know more after this council takes shape, to get the tone of the room. But I think they have an opportunity right now to look at, because we're kind of one of the last ones to do it, right? And so we'd be foolish not to look at the people around us and say, okay, what are they doing and what works and what doesn't work and what may or may not work here in New Jersey.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Maybe at some point there's an opportunity for those states that you mentioned to maybe have a little gathering, right, and talk about it. We did that regional thing at Longwood Gardens. I don't know if you were there. I can't remember. It was
No, I couldn't make it.
Oh my
Couldn't
gosh,
make
it
it.
was amazing to have just neighboring states, right? Like get together at Longwood Gardens of all places. It's like the best place in the world to get together and say, like, what are you guys dealing with? New Jersey, what are some of your big issues? So I think that this could be something that we should, kind of stay in touch with our neighboring states about too. So again, issues with, plants coming in, going out, those kinds of things, exemptions. Regulated plants, the whole 9 yards. So anyhow, okay, does anybody have questions? I know Ed put in the chat that he needs to leave. Again, thanks for your help. And he's a resource that we can use when needed. Any questions for Bob, or we can hand it off to Bruce if not. Bob, you'll be sticking around if anybody, right, has any
Yep.
other questions. Okay, great. Okay, next up, Bruce. Now, I know you have an awesome PowerPoint, so do you want to try to share that?
I will try.
Okay. It's getting there. All right.
How's that?
Yep, just do what, yep, perfect. Perfect. Okay, thank you, Bruce. You're on.
Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. So I looked at this from a couple of different perspectives. One was, why, thinking about native plants, why do we want to perpetuate native plants? Why are they important? And one of the things I think a lot of homeowners, and including professional gardeners, we don't see on a day-to-day basis why they're so important. We don't see the insects that eat them. We don't see how the food chain actually works. And so, so I picked out a majority of the plants were natives, not all, but I just sort of wanted to think about it from a perspective of, what's going to be nibbling on these plants and what is our job here per se to feed the insects. And because everyone goes, oh, we don't want bugs, but we need bugs. And let's face it, I mean, without caterpillars, we don't have birds. And I think Doug Ptolemy's done a really good job of sort of pointing that out. So he also pointed out that 30% of a landscape can be non-native plants, and it'll work totally fine. So I'm totally on the boat for some fun, great ornamentals that are not native. So so anyway, I broke it down to woody plants, vines, and herbaceous. Obviously, Norway maple. Nona, I remember Bruce Hamilton always said, why is this and the Bradford pear so popular? And it's basically when you're a little kid, you draw a stick with a circle on the top and you go, oh, it's a tree. And that's exactly what these plants look like. And so to us, they sort of have that tree-like image. And I think that's what started them off in popularity. And they're easy to grow. And obviously, one of the plants that you think about to substitute, oh, well, red maple has that same shape, which it does. And it's a great tree. It's tolerant of a lot of urban abuses, a good street tree. It is shallow rooted, so it tends to lift curbs a little bit. And sometimes you have to watch the branch structure on it because it can get a little funky with codominant stems. But by and large, great tree, great fall color, does a lot of good. One to always keep in the back of our minds. And then when thinking something a little bit perhaps out of the box, hackberry. And hackberry gets its name from the Scottish term hagberry, which is actually a cherry, but the fruits of the hackberry and that of the hagberry look very similar, and so that's how it got its name. Lavagotus is the southern form, and I see this every day I go to Willowwood Arboretum. Gorgeous specimen, nice arching shape, but you notice too that it has a rather open canopy, so it allows a lot of the sunlight to come through, and you can grow material underneath it. And also it has a glossy leaf. So when you compare that to our native New Jersey hackberry, you can see that it's got a smaller, glossier leaf. But if you don't put them side by side, here's out in Pennsylvania, going to my son's house. I was like, oh, look at that beautiful tree on the side of the road. And I jump out and I'm taking a picture, and of course it's hackberry. And of course everybody's passing me thinking I'm a total jerk, but God, that's a gorgeous tree. So and we don't really see them used that much anymore, and I think we should. And then on top of that, you can almost see it in this image. Look at the bark that you sometimes get. So this is in my backyard. But that is an awesome, awesome looking bark. So if you liked winged euonymus, there's your native substitute for it if you like bark. So anyway, fun stuff. And hackberry varies. Sometimes it's just pebbles, and sometimes you get these enormous wings, which I think are good fun. No one in probably North Jersey is planting albizia, mimosa tree, or hardy silk tree, as I was taught, but more for down south. But when you start to think about it, okay, you got that pink flower, what else could you use? And so the American smoke tree, another great plant that's been out there forever, but doesn't really seem to, hasn't really caught on. And I don't know why. This is the one we're looking at here is at Willowwood. And I mean, look at that fall color. I mean, that just leaps right at you, and it's a tough tree. It'll grow in the worst of environments. One thing you should know if you're looking at this for urban use, street tree underneath wire and so forth, think of single stem specimens and not multi-stemmed. Like this one here is multi-stemmed. But when I was thinking about this tree as a sub for mimosa, I was thinking about the flowers. Now it blooms a little bit earlier, but it still has that nice pink, smoky flower to it, which again is what your mimosa is all about. So interesting substitute for it, and I think a neat plant. Also has great yellow-orange fall color, which is fun. Now, of course, barberry. I grew up with barberry. I always thought it was sort of fun with the fruits on it. But then it bit, and who wants a plant that bites? So I always found that to be a drawback to barberry, and it's very rare that I think I ever used it. So nine bark, when I was at the gardens, I really became infatuated with this plant because it had cool bark. As you can tell, I'm into bark. But it has 9 layers, or appears to have 9 layers of bark, hence the name nine bark. And there's a lot of purple foliage forms of this out there. Summer wine is one, which obviously has a nice arching shape and is a good substitute for purple barberry. The drawback to it is that it's in the rose family and does get nibbled on by deer. So that's the drawback. So that's the nice thing about barberry, of course, is that nothing eats it. I did see Physocarpus on the straight green form in Shenandoah last year on full bloom in late May. And God, it was awesome. So it's a great, great tree. Another plant which is deer resistant is smokebush. And so you look at this and go, well, that's a hell of a lot bigger than a barberry. Why would I want to plant that? But if you coppice it or you cut it back hard each year, the British call it stooling because you're cutting it back to the height of a stool leg, it will then form a plant that's about 6 feet tall, 5 feet tall by the end of the season and has dark purple foliage to it, but also keeps a more residential scale shape to it. Now, obviously, that involves maintenance, and if you're in the retail trade, you can't control that. So there's a drawback there, and that's where the nine barks obviously would have their advantage. The advantage on this plant, though, is that it's deer resistant. So there's ups and downs to things depending upon our deer population. Good old burning bush, Euonymus elatus. Compactus is also develops fruits and so forth. So glad to see that there is a sterile version out there. I hadn't heard about that yet. This was at the entrance to Frelinghuysen Arboretum, and it's no longer there. And thinking about, obviously, you're growing burning bush for that burning red fall color. Mount Airy Fothergilla with the rather intriguing little black cat sleeping underneath it. But again, Fothergilla, known for its fiery red fall color, and the intermediate types, such as Mount Airy, are more aggressive in size. They'll get up to 5 to 6 feet in height over time, and which is, again, when you're thinking of burning bush, it's about that size as well. Another great plant for fall color that we don't typically think about it for fall color, we typically think about it for the flowers, but is the oak leaf hydrangea. And great coarse texture, great obviously flowers in the summertime. But look at that fall color. Dear God, that doesn't that look like molten lava in there? I mean, that is hot and really cool. And that is one really nice attribute, I think, of oak leaf hydrangeas that most people sort of forget about. We go, oh, yeah, they have nice flowers and so on and so forth. But the fall color can last for upwards of a month. So, you know, that is actually lasts longer than some plants bloom. So when we think about that. So, again, great plant for fall color, great, best in sun as far as fall color goes. But it will tolerate shade. But again, then you're going to get less intense fall color. And another plant, which grow low, has been the hottest new commodity on it, which has been actually around for quite a few years now. But actually, I just like straight Rhus aromatica. And I sort of started to gain an appreciation for this plant when I were out west hiking. This is in Utah, but I also saw it in the Badlands next to in South Dakota. And here it's growing in an area where there's a little bit of water. There was behind me about 300, 400 yards, there was a spring. So there's a little bit of moisture here. But the plant that we're looking at is this guy right here. And so it's just a green plant during the summer months, growing in the harshest of conditions. And that's, again, what we really want and look for. But look at the fall color. And so this is at Frelinghuysen. And this will last for over a month. So this color comes on. It keeps getting better and better and better as the weeks grow on. And I actually took some of the saturation out of this image so that it wasn't oversaturated. So it's actually a little bit better than this, but I just sort of wanted to show you how intense it gets. So the fragrant sumac, pretty good deer resistance, good fall color, good for full sun. Can be a cutback, can be used as a shrub, has multiple uses in the garden. So grow low has sort of gained the attention right now, but this one, I think we should start using the straight species a lot more. English ivy. So the interesting thing about English ivy is that it either grows up or it grows out. And trouble when it grows up is then it flowers and fruits, and then you start to get English ivy plants growing all over the place. So we're starting to tear them out of the trees in the Morris County Park commissions because it produces seedlings, and B, I always worry about if it's putting an extra stress on the tree as far in heavy winds. So the tree is deciduous, but all of a sudden now you have this mass of evergreen foliage on it that the plant really wasn't probably accustomed to when it developed root system wise. And what does that do to it? So anyway, looking at some alternative ground covers, not necessarily climbers. Canadian ginger. I see it growing in Warren County natively. Grows in harsh conditions next to roads and is tolerant. This was planted as a plug 3 years prior. You can see it's totally filled in. Looks great with ferns, obviously, great textural difference. But Canadian ginger, again, it's deciduous, but that's fine as far as I'm concerned. And then Dervilla. This is a plant I've been sort of championing for years. And there's a lot of new selections coming out with golden foliage or dark purple foliage. But this is copper, which has been around for a number of years now. And this is up at Crystal Springs in Sussex County, New Jersey. So planted on this slope, it's in full beating sun, doesn't get any irrigation, a little bit of overflow from the putting greens, but it's not intentionally irrigated. And they don't really weed it, so which I was impressed at. So it gets very little attention, and it looks great. So if you're looking for a full sun and you're looking for a plant that'll get up to about 2.5 feet tall, 3 feet at max, copper is a great one. And I've seen the plant in the wild in New Hampshire growing in the harshest of conditions, and it survives. So little yellow flowers, it blooms in July, good for pollinators, but just a great, I think, attractive plant. It's deciduous, not evergreen, but still a nice alternative ground cover that we're not really thinking about. Privet, I was leaving Willowwood last year, and I was surprised to see that a homeowner on the way home had planted a new privet hedge. And I was like, oh, dear God, we're still planting. The only reason I say that is at Bamboo Brook, when you go up behind it, the woods are nothing but privet. I mean, it's just thickets of privet. So, so this is one of those plants that I definitely understand why it's on the invasive species list. And when you think about a substitute, there's a lot of different material that you can use for hedging. But Cornus moss or Cornus officinalis, depending, both officinalis blooms a little bit earlier by a week or so, and it holds the fruit a little bit later. But moss makes a great hedge. I mean, look at that. So I was up in Connecticut somewhere on a trip, and I just thought, as far as hedge work goes, I think that's different. And then it comes on with these very early blooms, and then produces a fruit, which moss is very high in vitamin C, and you can make jams out of it. Officinalis, which is what is pictured here, this is Kentucky. It's a little bit more insipid, so you don't really want to eat these fruits. But again, if you're looking for a substitute for privet for a hedge, and you're thinking, well, I could do hornbeam, or what else could I use? That's pseudo deciduous. Think about Cornus moss. I have never seen any, man, I'm pretty sure someone will say, yeah, I just planted that last year. But I have not seen Photinia planted. I've seen it in botanic gardens. Great for flowers in the spring, has really good red fruit in the fall. It's not heavy, but it does have an attractive red fruit. And that's obviously why it spreads around. And what could you sub for that? Well, bottle brush buckeye. Super little plant, and I don't know why it doesn't gain more attention, but it has fantastic flowers, look like a true bottle brush, attracts all sorts of wildlife attention, and it gets great yellow fall color. And so, if you're thinking of a nice plant to put next to a road for privacy, to tolerate salt abuse, great plant, and good, obviously, yellow fall color. If you're looking for the red fruit, obviously winterberry holly would serve that. Sprite is a lower growing form, gets up to about 5 feet tall. You can go with taller forms. Winter gold gets up to about 6 to 8 feet, and obviously has golden fruit on it. So depending, where you want to go with it, both are deciduous, obviously. But if you're looking for the fruit aspect of Photinia, obviously winterberry holly would be more than a good substitute. Crab apples. I've never been a super big crabapple fan, but I have, I do love the flowers, obviously, and I do love the fruit. If you're looking for something that a little bit different for the flower and a May bloomer, I have no idea why the red buckeye is not more popular. This is down at Pleasant Run Nursery, and Rich Hessline made a couple of selections out of the rows at Princeton Nurseries. This is one of his selections. It's unnamed, I believe, but look at that flower display. I mean, it's a knockout, and just like the bottle brush buckeye, I don't see them used in residential gardens. So a great substitute. Another thing for crab apples would obviously be serviceberry, the Amelanchier. So flowers obviously are for a relatively short period of time, give or take about a week. But then you get good fall color, and obviously you get nice fruit set. And I remember eating serviceberry pies at Bruce Hamilton's house, and it tastes like blueberry, but it's a little bit different, but still a lot of fun. So, and of course Bradford pear. So black gum Nissa. This is here at Frelinghuysen Arboretum in the parking lot. I saw this for I don't know how many hundred of feet away, and I saw this glowing in the parking lot, and I was like, oh man, what is that tree? And of course it was Tupelo, and shot the images last year. But just like the Bradford pear, it has glossy foliage, it has fruit, the female versions for the wildlife, which birds obviously love, so treating them to a nice treat. Something else, if you're like, well, what else in there if I have, what do you got for bark? And Perodia is a tough plant. This is growing in Mendham, New Jersey, obviously on a sharp slope, but it is growing in sand. And so this is doing really well in harsh environments, great fall color. And then it has bark. And so a lot of people are looking for perhaps something with exfoliating bark. My old roommate in college thought it was a dying tree, but I happen to think it's something attractive. So to each their own. Viburnum sieboldii, this was a photographed at Willowwood Arboretum, and we have seedlings of Viburnum sieboldii coming up everywhere. Good for the flower, but obviously the fruit in the fall is rather attractive. So a native sub might be sumac. And laciniata, not only does it have good fall color and the fruit, but interesting branching habit, which I think is pretty cool. So and the berry-like drupes, which again are attractive throughout the summer into fall. Getting into vines, Ampelopsis, I saw the variegated form of it used once in the garden. I thought it was really attractive, and that was before I knew how aggressive this plant is. So I would never, ever plant this plant, having rogued out hundreds of them over the years. But if you're interested in the fruit-like set, what could be a substitute? Well, kiwi. Now, again, kiwi grows rapidly, so it can be a bit of a nuisance. My son just purchased a house up in upper New York State with kiwi growing on it, and needs a good pruning. But kiwi does have the advantage of having some incredible bark from the stems, obviously good fruit to eat, and also there's a variegated form named Arctic Beauty. So if it is a variegated plant you're looking for, this one could be of interest. Wisteria, I tell you, this is at Willowwood Arboretum, and for the number of times, 3 or 4 times a year that I am pruning these things, you only get a week of flower out of it. My God, I'm putting so much time into pruning; it's hardly worth it. But when it's in bloom, all the visitors come and go, "Ooh, look at that! Oh my gosh, pretty! Oh, that's so gorgeous!" But what about our native? So frutescens, absolutely gorgeous. And then there's Macrostachys, which has slightly bigger flowers. Again, one of our native wisterias, and I think it's just absolutely fantastic. So, and here's Macrostachya, which is just a little bit longer than frutescens, straight frutescens. And lastly, getting into herbaceous, Lythrum, which we have. This is in Alamuchie, New Jersey, so across from the grammar school. So it's around if we've got it, and so if it's in better drain conditions, we're looking for that spiky blue flower. Agastache Blue Fortune, readily available, gets up to 3-4 feet tall, and good flower set for the midsummer. And Verano castrum, one that I really wasn't that familiar with, the Culver's root, many years ago, and I sort of experimented and tried it with it, but it has a nice spiky flower to it, obviously. Lavender Towers, which is in the upper right-hand corner, obviously has that bluish, pinkish cast to it, which would pick up the Lythrum quite nicely. And this flower blooms at the same time as does Bottlebrush Buckeye. And so they repeat that structure. So if you have the Bottlebrush Buckeye in the background and this in the foreground, it has, even though obviously a totally different plant, but it repeats the form, which again gives the garden cohesion. Miscanthus, 30 years ago, I was a huge fan of Miscanthus. There's some growing down around the corner from my home on Shades of Death Road, and the closest Miscanthus is a good half-mile away. How did the seed get there? So I'm totally a convert, and so I haven't planted Miscanthus now in years. And probably one of the best substitutes is Panicum, which there's a whole slew of different cultivars out there. But Northwind, which has a very upright habit to it, blends well, obviously, with different herbaceous material. And then Dallas Blues, which has a bluish cast to it throughout the spring into the summer. And then when it comes into flower, it loses that bluish cast, but it picks up this great yellow-orange fall color. It's more of an arching plant. It's not as upright as Northwind, but still super plant, readily available, and again, it just really doesn't have the same exact inflorescence as Miscanthus, but still gets up to 5 feet tall, and still does all the wonderful thing that deep-rooted grasses do. So, so I just, when you're thinking about this group of plants, It's all of, I'm thinking of from a bug perspective when I made these selections. And so it's, if we don't, an entomologist will tell you that if we lose our bugs, we'll pretty much collapse because it's obviously our food production comes from it as well. So, so when you're thinking about these plants and putting them together, think about, how they'll sustain our native plant zones. And, talk to homeowners about that too, because lots of times they're not sensitive to that. So anyway, that sort of wraps up a quick list. So I went over 20 minutes, but I tried to be good.
Awesome, Bruce. Thank you. Okay. Any questions for Bruce before we kind of wrap it up? I know there was a question or two in the chat. Bob pointed out that there are some semi-dwarf, varieties of smokebush that will top out at around 4 to 5 feet tall, wide. So cool to know. And then Jason had a question that Bob answered as it relates to one of a variety of the Taringo that we think would still be allowed. So because it's from a different derivative. So any other questions for Bruce, for Bob? Not at the moment. Okay. So what you'll get your via email is a list that Bruce put together of some alternatives, and then a recording of this webinar or meeting once it's uploaded. Okay. And then I am going to two things one thing actually that I wanted to mention. Back at the beginning, Ed mentioned he texted me. He had to leave, but he texted me to say he misspoke when it came when he talked about the rules and regs. According to the bill, the DEP, the department, has 12 months after the effective date of this act to put together the rules and regulations. 12 months. Okay. Doesn't mean they're going to do it. I'm just telling he was saying it was like 48 months or whatever. It's not. What I think he was confusing is the phase-in timeline, which if you received, we kind of gave a summary to our members of the Invasive Species Management Act. The phase-in timeline, 13 months after enactment, propagation and importation of listed species are prohibited without a conditional use waiver. And then 49 months after the enactment, sale, distribution, export, or offering for sale are prohibited without a waiver. Okay, so 12 months for the rules. Like Ed said, we will work with the DEP and the governor's office to try to, see if they can move things along. And then hopefully the council will be seated soon and we'll get to work on this. So President of the NJNLA, Tom Kanazik, is with us. Tom, you want to say hi to everybody and maybe some parting words of wisdom?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So again, as Lori mentioned, I'm Tom Knezik, president of NJNLA. Had to join a little late. I hesitate to call it a family emergency. My dad had knee replacement surgery, and then I had to help him get home and in the house. So I got here a little late. But the big thing that I want to say is NJNLA worked really hard to with a lot of the environmental groups to make this a bill that worked well for both the nursery industry and the environment, and finding a balance because it is a financial hit for a lot of nurseries, but it's also an opportunity for them to coach their customers into new choices that are better for the environment, one, but also hopefully better for our businesses and our bottom lines. So that's a good way to think of it. If you have other concerns, whether it's with this list or future proposals, things that that come up on as potential additions to the invasive species list, that's where it's going to be. We want you guys to get in touch with NJNLA and then the members of that invasive species council to give your feedback, because we're a community and we have to help guide those conversations and give all the information that we can to make sure that we aren't looking at it later and saying, oh, that shouldn't have been added because of X, Y, and Z. Let's get that information into the hands of the people who are making decisions early enough, so that it's productive. You know? And yeah, no, thank you everyone for joining. Again, if anyone has questions, I think we're here for another couple minutes, um, and then anything that comes up afterwards, feel free to send it to Lori or myself or anyone at NJNLA, and we're happy to help.
And we will continue to keep you updated through the whole process, right? As we find out about the council, hopefully our recommendations will be considered. And any step in the process, that's what we do. We'll keep you informed and let you know. So Shona has a question in the chat. Does anybody want to take a stab at that? What about Butterfly Bush and Rose of Sharon? They weren't on the list. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So from what I understand, um, the list the list that's been passed in this iteration is basically there was a lot of I don't want to call it stealing, but we took a lot from New York's list, Pennsylvania's list, other neighboring states that have plants on, and those two species in particular are known to be invasive in other parts of the U.S., but they aren't on a lot of our neighbors' lists, as far as I remember. So I think that's why they're on a list of potential future additions, um, but not on this initial prohibited list.
Perfect. Perfect. Yeah. And I think, again, one of the first duties of that council will be to kind of review that list, review,
Yep.
future lists, all that kind of stuff. Again, why it's so critical that we're kind of heavily involved in that on both sides, right? We want to do the right thing for the environment. We want to make sure we're protecting the industry. So fine balance, but we've got this. Anything else before we wrap it up? Look at us, 1:30. Wow, shocker. We usually always run late. So, okay. Again, like Tom said, we are here. We're your resource. So if you need anything, you think of something, you have questions, if there's, something we need to be doing, whether it's invasive species or any other bill or regulation that you see out there, come to us. That's what we're here for. So, appreciate your time today. Stay warm. Spring's going to be amazing. Maybe I'll see a lot of you at Total Pro Expo, February 18th. And if not, we'll see you again soon. So thanks again. Take care, everybody.